All right, we are live.
Awesome.
Jasmine Williams. I'm so
Yes.
excited that you're here.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here.
I have so many questions to ask you, questions that I want to ask you personally, questions that I know our listeners want to ask you as well. And I want to start by thinking about the word that you've set for the year. You've set a very bold intention for the year.
Yes.
And I want to ask this because every year I go away, usually around November, December, and I have a retreat. And I do this exercise called the Year Compass exercise. Have you heard of it?
I think so. Yeah.
Yearcompass.com. Fantastic little exercise. You can usually split it up into 2 days, but sometimes people power through it and they do it in one. It's broken up into 2 parts. The first part is looking back at your year and firming up what happened during that year. It asks you to identify themes.
Yeah.
Themes around family, around career, around friends, finances, relationships, so on and so forth, and really make meaning of what happened. And then you pause, take a break, and then you do the next part, which is forward thinking, and you set intentions for how you want your next year to be. And so everything was going well. And in years past, I've had no problem articulating what I want my word for the year to be. This year I was stuck. This year, not only did I land on several words, by the time I finished the exercise, I thought to myself, I actually don't know what I want my year 2019 to be.
Right.
But you came out swinging. Your word was one of the most profound, simple, and just inspiring words. A three-letter little word, Joy, joy. How did you confidently arrive at that?
Yeah, well, the kind of word of the year is something that I've been doing for, I guess, the past 3 or so years, because I've always been somebody, a very goal-oriented person, and I was always, setting those, typical New Year's resolutions, gonna get fit, blah, 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 and, you fall off after a month, or you, do the month, and then you're like, oh, I'm tired, I don't want to do this again.
Gyms are packed in January, and then by February, March, ghost towns.
I know, the New Year's resolutioners, it's
Never
so funny.
works, yeah.
But, the first time I started it, my first word was actually just consistency.
Okay.
Because that's kind of what I wanted. I was always doing these kind of quick hit challenges and then falling off. And it was this constant, cycle. So I was just be consistent. Just kind of, find an exercise. That year is very exercise focused. So it's just find a form of exercise that you like and then just do it. And then if you fall off, just get back on. Stop doing these 30-day challenges. Just, commit to doing something. And it worked, I was finally able to sort of establish a routine, at least was regularly exercising in a way I hadn't really done since, I guess, high school. So then I just kind of kept doing it. Last year, my word was acceptance, which I didn't quite, it was a hard word for me, I think. I don't think I quite got it,
right.
But it was still kind of a goal because it was kind of the anti-consistency. I was okay, you worked really, really hard for a long time, just accept where you are, kind of accept what's coming rather than trying to force your way through things. And then I just started a company, so I guess I didn't really accept anything. But but then joy, I joy because last year was quite a roller coaster. Quit my job in May or so, started a company in June, and then that's just been quite a ride ever since. And it was work. It's a lot of work. It still is a lot of work. But I definitely let kind of all self-care go out the window. Kind of in the beginning when I started the company, I was sort of lax and I was hanging out with my friends and blah blah blah, and then I kind of had to have a moment with myself where it's you need to get your shit together,
right.
Because there's nobody else anymore.
No.
It's just
you're
you.
in free fall.
Yeah. So then I kind of almost overcorrected and worked insane hours, didn't really do anything besides work, and burnt out, I think burnt out multiple times.
Wow. Within an 8-month span.
Yeah. I was just running a marathon and just kept moving the finish line. It wasn't sustainable.
And your 2 words that were, that you set prior to that, I think, would you agree that they came back in some way as well, where you had to really figure out what a consistent schedule or routine looks like for you as an entrepreneur, but then also accepting the fate that you had committed to, but also at the same time acceptance for yourself personally, which you suggested, but then thinking about acceptance and approval from others as well, because now not only are you your own boss, but you're also your own client, you are also a service provider, you are so many things now in this space.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think those words I think that's why I gravitate towards these words of the years, because they're not resolutions. Like, they're not necessarily things that can be tied up in a year. It's not like train for a marathon's done. Like, yeah, consistency, acceptance, these are always things that I'm like striving to be better at, striving to have more of in my life. So yeah, and then adding joy on top of that was just kind of a reminder to myself to make time for fun, because it's just like you need both.
Totally. You know, I used to be one to set intentions in the past, and like you suggested over there, I would just fizzle out very quickly. And I think the problem with intentions is that they necessitate intensity. And intensity is never a long-term strategy. Intensity is just working in a short burst, working very, very in a very applied way. And then you don't really see results in the long run. What I found to be more effective over time was systems, doing small things and doing them often.
Yeah.
I call them daily imperative actions. What's one thing that you can do every single day that'll make it more true that you will arrive at that destination that you've set for yourself? So my word for 2018 was foundations. And every day I said, I'm going to lay foundations for my personal life, for my professional life, for my academic life, for this business, for that line of income, all of that. And I just worked very diligently over 365 days to lay foundations. What are you going to do in 2019 to lay foundations for building joy, so that when we have this conversation at the end of the year, because we're having it at the top of the year, when we have it at the end of the year, what are you going to do now that will make it such that you will feel more joyous by the time we hit 2020?
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, yeah, that's one thing, like, I've started, like, I've never really been much of, like, a planner person, but I started using a planner, and it kind of, at the end of the week, it always asks, you know, like, what were your wins? Like, what were you going to try to do in this next week to be more productive? And I realized, too, that, like, my productivity is also very much tied to my happiness. So every kind of week, I set a little goal for myself, like whether it's like go work out at a co-working space, you know, just get out of the house. Like I try to make more of a commitment to talk to my friends or just reach out to friends. Like I'm a very almost extreme introvert. And so like it's so weird to me sometimes to just be like, hey, do you wanna hang out?
I need connection. I need another person to look at me.
Can somebody talk to me, please? But I've been working on that, and it's like, yeah, and the more I do it, I think the easier it gets, because like I don't know what I'm expecting. Like, are people just going to be like, no, I'm too busy for you, bye? No.
Right.
And most people are like, yeah, I was thinking about you too, I'd love to grab coffee. So just doing those little things to prioritize the people in my life and like the things that I love to do. Like I've been trying not so successfully to like wake up a little bit earlier just to read in the mornings, because reading is something that I like super enjoy. Like I don't even really do, like I do it for fun. Like I don't do it as like I need to read more. Like I just genuinely love it. And
I have so many questions about your process and about how it is that you're able to consistently apply yourself to produce high quality, award-winning content. And I think, you know, you're teasing a little bit about your process when you say that you read quite a lot, and that's something that I've totally fallen off on, and I feel like I need to get back on. So I'm going to save that for the second part of this conversation. Before we get into that, you were in Jamaica not too long ago.
I was.
And this is the first time that you went back to Jamaica in over 10 years.
Yeah.
And your mom's from Jamaica, and you went to go visit your grandmother.
Yes.
What was Jamaica like?
It was amazing. It was such a weird, like, sometimes like I get into this kind of like high school poet mentality whenever I go like to the Caribbean, because like it's very like, as somebody who, let me kind of backtrack. So my dad is from Antigua, another island in the Caribbean, and I spent more time in Antigua than I've spent in Jamaica, just because Jamaica, there's a lot of crime there. It just wasn't always safe for my family to visit. And what I was immediately like struck by when I got to Jamaica was just how similar it was to Antigua. Like, I guess in my head, I kind of expected it to be different, or just expected it to look different from what I remembered, but it didn't. And that was just kind of a really complex feeling, I guess, of like, I'm so happy that it's still the same, or it's a place that I recognize, but you're also kind of like, oh, I wish there maybe was a bit more progress that's been there. So yeah, that's that. But yeah, it was great. Like I got to see parts of the island I hadn't really gotten to see before. Like I went to Ocho Rios.
Nice.
Like did the whole swimming with dolphins, climbing waterfalls, all of that stuff. It was also really great for my family to kind of reconnect. We're all very like super busy. Like we're basically, I'm from a family of entrepreneurs. Like all my mom, my dad, even my grandmother, they all own their own businesses. So we're all very busy. So it was kind of great to just have everybody together, you know, like Christmas, like all these generations like in the kitchen,
There you
like
go, a tropical Christmas almost.
yeah, yeah.
Which is amazing. When you say that you come from a family of entrepreneurs, and so do I, but it seems like our first instinct was to take traditional corporate desk jobs.
Yeah.
We'll get into that, but back to the topic of Jamaica real quick. So
Yeah.
I was there last year for a bachelor party.
Okay.
And I'm aware that being on a resort isn't the authentic experience in any country. I mean, for all intents and purposes, going to a resort could be a simulation. I've been to Cuba, I've been to Dominican, I've been to all the typical places.
Yeah.
I don't know if they were the same places or not, because I could have just gotten onto that plane. They could have put some VR headset over me or just gassed me out with the plane by changing the pressure. And then I could have woken up in the exact same place, some set in Florida.
Yeah.
And they could have just said, hey, like, Ola versus, Wagwan. I mean, it could have been the exact same place.
Yeah.
But I tried to make it a point to get out of the resort and just verify for myself
Yeah.
that this is a real place. And the place that they told me to go in Jamaica was Scotchy's.
Ooh, yeah. I
You've
went
been to Scotchy's?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm always hesitant when people say you have to go to this place. I'm
Yeah.
like, do I really? Like, are you giving me the tourist recommendation or are you giving me the local authentic recommendation?
Yeah.
From your perspective as somebody who is from Jamaica, who has roots from Jamaica,
Yeah.
was Scotchy's a good recommendation that I got?
I thought it was pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I enjoyed it. It was fantastic.
Yeah, no, it was great. And it's just like the experience of being there, like just all the smoke and everything. It was, yeah, I don't know. Like when my family gets together, we just love to eat. So like, yeah, we made it a fact, like a priority to hit up like all the food spots that we could get to.
Amazing. I'm so happy to hear that because every now and then you have some food, which is the paragon of food.
Yeah.
Like I've had jerk chicken my entire life,
Yeah.
but then I had Scotchy's jerk chicken.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this is what jerk chicken is supposed to taste
It's like the smoke is like infused and then you have the spices. Yeah, it was great.
So good. And I was a fellow Scarberian. If somebody were to ask you, what's the go-to place in Scarborough that you have to eat here? What would that place be for you?
Oh man, that's tough. Yeah, there's so many good places in Scarborough. Like Scarborough is so huge. Like I think if people aren't from Scarborough, they don't realize quite how big it is.
Oh yeah.
But
Sprawl, yeah.
Yeah, but I gotta rep my Warden Station patties.
Warden Station patties. Cannot go wrong with Warden Station patties.
Yeah.
I would defer to Kennedy. I'm partial to Kennedy Station myself.
All right.
But what about like restaurant wise?
Restaurant wise, there's like a really good Hakka place.
I was so happy you said that.
Yeah.
Let's hear this. And
I
I have a theory on Hakka, but go for it.
Oh man, my friends are gonna kill me for not remembering the name, but I know it's like close to Markham and Ellesmere, which is like where I.
Is it Federick's?
Oh, Federick's is good.
Okay.
Yeah, that's literally like right beside my high school.
There
But
you
there's
go.
like there's another newer spot.
There's a bunch of them. There's like Hakka Legend.
I
There's
think that's it.
yeah,
If-
Hakka Legend has a couple of different spots.
Yeah.
In and around. Well, they're actually polarized. They're either in Scarborough or all the way in Peel region. Man, so if there's any enterprising listeners of this podcast who have an inclination to start up a restaurant, I think you could make a killing by starting a Hakka joint in downtown.
Ooh.
There's none here.
There isn't.
There's one, but it's not authentically Hakka. It's like a hybrid restaurant. It's
Yeah.
like Asian fusion.
Yeah.
And they have a couple of like dishes that are Hakka-ish, but nothing quite like Hakka.
But then the prices.
Yes, yeah. But I think there's a possibility to do like artisanal, for lack of a better phrase, hipster-friendly Hakka that could happen downtown.
I think it could happen. It's weird. Like I actually realized, like close to where my mom still lives. Like was just, I don't know. I think a Block TO thing popped up, and there's a restaurant that basically is like a Caribbean Chipotle. Like they
Caribbean
do,
Chipotle,
like they do like the
interesting.
rice bowls and the toppings,
Yeah.
but it's like jerk chicken,
They got
jerk
their
shrimp.
mise en place and
Yeah, and it's like, all right.
very interesting.
Yeah.
So you heard the podcast from last week where we had Asawa and he was talking about just building up the brand of Brampton, and it got me really thinking about what it is that I can do as somebody who identifies with Scarborough, somebody who was raised over there, somebody who thinks of it as his hometown, even though I live downtown. What is it that I can do to build up the brand of Scarborough? And I think that cuisine is going to play a big role in that. That's one of the few places that I've been to that has such a melting pot, a tapestry, if you will, of different cultures, and it's really reflected in the food over there.
Yeah.
But a better story needs to be told about Scarborough. I feel like their stories are there, but that story needs to be amplified and told in a different way where people are able to dispel their preconceived notions about Scarborough and venture out. It's not that far.
Yeah.
And we're very lucky that, we live in the core and we can commute there, and, I have access to a car and I can drive there all the time.
Yeah.
But I would love to see the narrative around Scarborough change. And let's talk about narrative for a second, because you do such a great job of telling stories.
Oh, thank
You
you.
do such a great job of taking brands and amplifying their story, raising their profile, raising their awareness. I actually got a quote from your website over here. Your homepage right there says, "Content creation services for game changers and change makers.
Yeah.
Let me bring your story to life."
Yeah.
Can you walk us through how it is that you set down this path that brought you to this specific application of your gifts?
Whew.
Sorry, big question, but why don't we start from high school?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you're young Jasmine Williams in high school.
Mm-hmm.
You're looking up at the world. You can go anywhere.
Yeah,
Why do you choose to go down this path that brought you here?
for sure. Yeah.
Because
Well,
it was a very coherent path.
so you say, yeah.
LinkedIn's lying to me.
Yeah, no. I guess like for me, like I've always known I wanted to be a writer in some way, shape, or form. Like I started reading from an early age, and then quickly after that, I was writing. Like I would literally make my own storybooks. I'd like design the covers. I'd have the pipe cleaner bindings. Like,
Wow.
and it just was just for my mom. Like,
Way to go.
it would just be like
Customer number one.
Yeah, here's my new story. So yeah, it was like I guess I was lucky in that way, in that I never really had that sort of like high school soul searching, what do I do? Like it was always obvious, writing. Like it just came as naturally to me as breathing. It was just what kind of writing, what kind of writer did I want to be? And I remember one day like my dad kind of like sat me down. He's like, okay, you gotta pick your classes now, pick your courses. And I was like, okay, well, there's creative writing, and I guess there's journalism. Like, at the time, I didn't even really think about being a journalist. Like, I didn't really, like, we don't really even study it much in high school. But I kind of read more about it, and I was like, okay, pop culture. Like, I like watching the news. I like learning about people, talking to people, seeing what's going on. That seems like a better fit. Like, creative writing is fun, but it just didn't seem like the kind of career path I wanted to go down. It always sort of felt like just like a nice hobby. So yeah, I picked journalism. I applied to, the top schools that I could, because I had pretty good marks. So I was like, and also like if I was going to study journalism and not like business or medicine, then I guess kind of like the immigrant parent thing, you want to go to the best school you can go to.
Totally.
I think even my parents are probably, I wouldn't say they probably aren't upset, but like they actually wanted me to apply to like American schools.
Really?
But I just didn't want to spend the money, or I didn't want to spend their money.
Did you have someone in your life that could show you the ropes, that could tell you how it is that you could succeed in the industry? Did you have somebody who had industry connections?
No.
So you paved a new way. You charted a new frontier for yourself.
I guess so, yeah. Like my dad is an accountant by trade,
Okay.
And then my mom is a doctor. So like really great role models, but yeah, none. Like it's funny because like my family jokes that like my younger brother is a dancer. Like he goes to high school right now for performing arts, and he's like, yeah, an accountant and a doctor gave birth to a writer and a dancer. So yeah, they had no real
from traditional mindset. Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't really have any bearings when it came to like pursuing a career in like a creative field.
Right.
I think they were just sort of like, well, just go to the best school, get the best education you can get. So so then I applied to Carleton. I got in, and then while I was there, I tried writing for the school newspaper. I didn't really like the vibe there. I felt it was a little pretentious, not gonna lie. I just never quite felt like I fit. So kind of naturally, I created something new. So I'd heard about this website called Her Campus.
Her Campus. Shout out to Her Campus.
Shout out to Her Campus. It was like an online magazine for university age women, and then at the time they were launching this kind of ambassador type program.
Right. So
where
you have a Carleton specific Her Campus.
Yeah. So then they were like, start a Her Campus at your school. And I remember like looking over at my like university roommate at the time. I was like, let's do this. Let's do this together. Like I'll be the editor in chief. You can be the president. Like it's gonna be great. So then we put the application together. We put it in for a while. It was just kind of like a waiting game. Like, oh my God, did we make it? And then we were accepted. Wow. So then we got to work like recruiting a team and like building this magazine out. And then so that was like kind of my first experience, I guess, doing something entrepreneurial. I didn't even really think of it that way. It was just like, well, I want to write for a magazine someday.
Right.
So might as well kind of start now. But it was great. Like I learned so much from that, like just through the process of putting it together, you know, like hiring writers, editing writers, like building out a process, like a editorial calendar. And I did get a lot of guidance from her campus. Not like, don't get me wrong, like they give you a lot of documents to help you figure that all out. But it was great. Like I still remember like when one of our first sort of articles went viral, I think it got like 17,000 hits in like a week, and then eventually got like 50,000 hits. But I think that's still probably one of my better performing pieces of content. But like, yeah, it was just that was just like a really cool experience, and sort of like, yeah, I get kind of paved the way for what I'm doing now. But then I guess to skip over some things, like I graduated, wasn't quite sure what to do. Had a few different options. Like I had applied to a couple of internships, didn't get the internships. And then I sort of applied to grad school as a bit of a backup. So then when all the other things fell through, the backup kind of became the main plan. So
as it usually does sometimes, right?
Yeah. Like I remember even having like a literally 5 chart, like 5 different ways my life could go right now, and then kind of being like,
the
nope.
trees, the branches.
So yeah, I ended up doing a 1-year master's at Ryerson University in media production. And I was a little unfocused. Like I wasn't really prepared to do a master's at that time. But being at Ryerson kind of also sparked that entrepreneurial energy, I guess, a little bit, because Ryerson's so big about that. And yeah, like I've kind of found myself gravitating towards like entrepreneurial type things. Like I was doing like an entrepreneurial like elective. I did a couple of sort of entrepreneurial electives, and then graduated. And I think that's actually around the time that like we first met. And then meeting you was also a big aspect of how I kind of ended up gravitating towards marketing, because I remember going to like a presentation that you did about Splash Effect. I think it was just about like for people who might be interested in advertising, because I remember I was about to graduate and I just had no idea really what kind of thing I wanted to do. And I remember seeing you and I'm not sure if Kareem was there, but you kind of, built this agency, and I remember looking at the website and seeing like all these diverse people there, and I was like, this is cool. Like I never thought like marketing advertising could look like that. I just assumed it looked, white.
Yeah, like typically female if you're in the content side.
Yeah.
You have your picture of your stereotypical marketing professional.
Exactly.
So Becky with thick rimmed glasses and, exactly. Platinum blonde hair,
For sure. So it was the first time, like, representation is so key, and it was one of those moments where I was like, oh, cool, like, I could see myself working there.
Wow.
And I remember kind of emailing you, being like, I have a journalism background, I've never done marketing, but, like, maybe there's a synergy there. And then it was, and we kind of continue to collaborate.
Wow, that's such an incredible compliment. I did not know that. I did not know that was part of the narrative as well. Thank you. That makes me feel really good and really, really proud of what it is that Kareem and I did with that organization.
Yeah.
And what's so interesting about your story, and I've known this has been true since the day that I met you. A theme that I'm now noticing for that part of your story that I didn't know about was that you always said yes to things. And I think it goes back to one of my favorite mantras, which is say yes to everything until you absolutely can't. Like, I don't think I've ever sent you a project that you've said no to.
Yeah.
And it seems like your success is directly proportional to the amount of total experiments that you generated.
Yeah.
Because things that you don't take care of, things that you don't voluntarily try to fix are only going to get worse. I think that's just a law of life, if you will. That call went out for her campus. Most people didn't answer the call. You did. Right? Most people didn't go to that networking event or that speaking event where I was speaking. You did.
Yeah.
Most people didn't take on the internships. You did. So you're constantly putting yourself out there and doing things that will make it more likely that you'll succeed. And I'm sure that you've had your fair share of failures. I'm sure that it all hasn't been home runs.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So then you come into this other phase of your life. So after we crossed paths, we had the year 1 project together. I think at that time you were just transitioning into Notable, I believe.
Not Notable. That was Talent Egg.
Talent Egg,
okay. Kind of the first real full-time job that I had.
And then I remember in that very short, maybe 5 or 6 year period, just back to back, like notable publication after notable publication, no pun intended. You went from Talent Egg to Notable, then Futurepreneur, Textbooks for Change. I think I'm getting the order wrong.
Yeah.
Like there was a clear path of like Jasmine Williams has entered into this tier now.
Yeah.
Where no one can afford your freelance services anymore. Like you went pro. And I think I stopped reaching out to you because I'm like, I literally can't afford to hire Jasmine Williams anymore. But then the announcement comes out that caught everyone by surprise, which is Jasmine Williams is now a free agent.
Yeah.
And my first reaction was, I don't know what we're going to work on, but I'm just going to email you right now and say, Jasmine, we're going to work on something. Can I lock you in at your introductory level rates? And you said yes. And then there was a long pause. And now here we are, just a cascade of tasks are coming.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad that I reached out. What has that transition been like for you? You are now full time. You're doing this.
Yeah.
Like you're living the dream. You are now your own boss.
Yeah.
Way to go. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it was it was quite like I guess like an emotional journey to get here, because like I guess like if you look at my career trajectory, it does kind of make sense. But yeah, for like I've always kind of, I guess to backtrack a little bit, like I've always done freelance writing on the side. Like it's always like, even when I was working with you, that was kind of like a freelance writing thing. It's just something I've done, but it was always something I sort of saw as more of like a hobby or just like a way to kind of bring in a little bit of extra income. Like I never really thought of it as something I really wanted to do or like really could do to support myself. But then, like, I crossed paths with this one. Well, I didn't really cross paths. I saw her on Facebook. She was, like, answering questions about entrepreneurship. Because at the time I was in, or I guess before I started, I was in a lot of entrepreneurship groups on Facebook because I was just, like, obsessed with it and really wanted to do it, but wasn't quite sure how. So then I saw this woman who was answering questions who just seemed to, like, know what was what. So I DM'd her, I guess similar to how I messaged you, being like, hey, like, I think you have I think I have a lot of questions. I feel like you're the one who can answer them. So then we chatted, we talked on the phone, and she gave me so much advice that day, just about like the kinds of clients I could work with. And like, in a way, I talking to her, I realized I was already doing a lot of things right. It was just kind of like a mindset thing where I would think like nobody would pay for it.
It was validating.
Yeah.
Most people are afraid to do that, and I'm not sure why. I wonder what it is about us, you know, maybe the way that we were parented, or maybe the resourcefulness that we had to develop pre-internet, or as the internet was burgeoning. I wonder what it is that allowed us to have that the confidence to reach out to people. And the world has never been smaller. I mean, you can reach out to anyone right now. You can have a full-blown conversation with a celebrity crush that you've been crushing on for as long as you have been. You can just find them on Instagram, send them the right DM, message the right post the right comment under their photo, and next thing you know, you're having a conversation with somebody.
Yeah.
And I benefited from a similar conversation where I reached out to a gentleman by the name of Andrew Giles from Good Buzz was the company. I applied for that internship, and I remember sending him that email, and I actually published a blog post about it where I showed the email that I wrote to him. He rejected me for the job, and then he gave me constructive feedback on the email. And it was a transformative thing, a small gesture. It took 5 minutes of his day, but it set me down the path that I'm on right now by validating, similarly to what you said, things that I was doing right, and then pointing out blind spots. And I feel like more of the listeners, more young people need to do that. They just reach out to the person who has the job that you want, reach out to somebody who you find inspiring. And chances are, if they're putting content out there, if they're putting themselves out there, they want to be reached out to.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So who was this person, by the way?
She, like, I talk about her all the time. Her name's Shauna Vert.
Shauna Vert. Shout out to Shauna Vert.
Shout out to Shauna. Yeah. She's a content consultant, and like I saw her, like I literally kind of creeped her, and I saw those words, content consultant. I was just like, oh, like, I think I could be that. I think that sounds like something I could do. And yeah, she was just so generous with her time and her expertise. Like, she literally, like, told, like, I remember on that phone call, she's like, Jasmine, like, I don't even know you, but I made X amount last month.
Wow. Like,
I'm telling you, we have the similar, and at the time too, like, she'd only been doing it for about a year. Right. And we had similar backgrounds, actually. We both went to Carleton, but just never met. So in similar ages. So she's like, we have this very similar background. You're a good writer from what I can tell. You know, you just need to kind of figure out who you should be reaching out to, how to price yourself services, how to price yourself well. Yeah. And then away you go, basically.
Very interesting. So you mentioned your mom is a doctor, your dad's an accountant, and you just found this new frontier of content, of marketing, of content creation, multimedia, and you're charting a path forward. Who are some of your mentors and role models in the space? Who are some people that you saw and said to yourself, in addition to Shauna Vert, who you said, if they're doing it, I can do it? Did you see yourself represented in the industry early on?
Uh, to be honest, not really. I think that's kind of
Interesting.
why it's like it took me a while to do what I wanted to do, because like I've wanted to do what I'm doing now for a long time. Like I
Right.
don't think I ever really wanted a traditional job. Like it was always a means to an end, or like it just seemed like the safe thing to do. And yeah, I just didn't really see a lot of women especially kind of
Yeah.
making their own way or freelancing. Like I saw freelancers, but I didn't really see anybody doing it full time. Like I guess in addition to Shauna, there's another woman named Kat Bugard,
Shout out to Kat
who
Bugard.
I've never
Yeah.
actually met. She just has a really wonderful blog where she talks about freelance writing.
Got it.
So that was another kind of resource. But again, she was kind of not really relatable because she's in the States. She's like married,
Right.
and living in Wisconsin. I'm like,
Different life intersection
yeah,
composition.
so it's like,
if you
okay,
will.
you can do it, but I'm not quite sure if I can. So I
Right.
kind of having like somebody like Shauna who's a bit closer to home, like
Got it.
I think I needed that validation.
Was it important to see women? I mean, this sounds like a silly question, but like, how important was it for you to see fellow women in positions of influence, who were entrepreneurs and eventually, their own bosses? Was that important for you as you were ascending this career path, or was it something that you became more tuned into later on?
For sure. Yeah, no, like seeking female role models has always been huge to me. Like I think there's something that's sort of hard to relate to with men. Like even though like I obviously do have male role models, it's just like there's that kind of natural confidence I think that a lot of men have,
Right.
that I just never quite had myself.
Yeah, and I apologize for the clunky phrasing of that question. The reason I asked is because one thing that I'm now unpacking as I get older and more mature and more knowledgeable about the world is how much I took for granted that there was always a role model that was a male in any space that I walked into, whether I was an intern at Sony Music, whether I was working in a tech startup early on in my life, Ryerson University, so on and so forth. Something I always took for granted, but now I'm hyper aware of spaces where the gender diversity is very imbalanced. And I think to myself, okay, wow, for all the junior staff that I'm working with, who are they looking up to? What kind of mentorship circle opportunities are being created? Is their voice going to be heard at the table? Who's going to help them to navigate this space? Let's talk about, while we're on the topic of representation, like, can you speak to what it felt like to be a woman of color specifically, coming up in an industry that was predominantly dominated, or was predominantly white? What did that feel like? I mean, did you see, it's starting from Carleton, were there a lot of people of color in your program?
No.
Wow.
I think there's like 2 other Black women in my graduating class.
You're not just your program, your class, eh?
Or like my program, like
Okay,
my
yeah,
journalism program.
Okay. How big was your program? Just to give some.
Like 80, I think, by
Oh
the
my
end of
goodness.
it. So
That's
yeah.
abysmal. 2 out of 80.
Yeah.
3 out of 80. Sorry.
Numbers weren't great. So yeah, it's just like kind of always feeling like very visible, and also feeling like I kind of have to code switch all the time. Like I think that's always been the biggest thing. Like it's not necessarily that I felt held back in any way. It was just sort of like I've always felt very mindful of like how people might perceive me and how I can like counteract those
And
perceptions.
when you say code switch, can you like point to like a specific example, even hypothetical, of like when would you have to code switch?
Just like if I'm in an office environment and like people bring up Scarborough or something like that,
Right.
like or even sometimes I'll say like, oh, I live in the East End, not Scarborough, just because I'm a little bit worried about the perception of it, or I just
Sure.
don't want people to think of me in a particular way.
Got it. Yeah.
But yeah, like I remember like at my last job before going freelance, like there was this one kid, I think he was from Brampton, so he's not even from Scarborough, but sorry, I call him a kid, but he was like an intern.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So, and then we'd kind of chat in the lunchroom and be like, yo guy, and just like exaggerated.
Yeah.
But like I remember seeing my coworkers being like, what?
What?
Like, because they were seeing like a side of me that they never really saw before.
Totally.
And that's the thing. It's like I can't even expose that side because you white guys don't get it.
Right.
So it's that sort of feeling where it's like I kind of have to be this very like acceptable, or not acceptable, just very palatable version of myself. But I feel like it's missing a big piece. Like there's all these references, all these things I can't make. And that was one thing that was so cool, like even working with you, like in Splash Effect, because everybody was from, either
All
Scarborough
over
or
the
Brampton.
place,
So
yeah.
like, we'd be talking about work, but also talking about music and talking about food and just culture. And
Right.
like that felt like I still to this day I don't think I've ever had kind of a work experience which kind of married.
Yeah, it was special.
Yeah.
And so much of that was actually influenced towards the tail end of that by none other than Charlemagne the God. Like I read Black Privilege. I read it front to back in one sitting, and I
Yeah.
said, "Whoa,
Yeah.
this is something else. Like this is a book unlike anything I've ever written." So I got the audiobook right away, listened to Charlemagne narrate it, which was even funnier than actually reading because I read it in his voice.
Yeah.
But he says something that's so profound that has actually changed the entire outlook on my life, which is live your truth.
Yeah.
And the minute I started leaning into my truth a lot more, I felt more confident. I became more self-actualized and actually more successful.
Yeah.
Which is so counterintuitive to what I was raised with. I remember when I spent time in the Canadian Armed Forces. I mean, that's an environment that insists that you diminish what makes you unique. You're reduced back into a component piece of something bigger.
Yeah.
They want you to be a name, they want you to be a number, they want you to be a soldier.
Yeah.
And so that experience then carried on with me for most of my career, where I felt like I had to fit into the culture. I had to fit into this homogenous structure and play into it. And it was only when I came to Ryerson where the mantra of bring your authentic self to work started to be reinforced and became a refrain that I thought, okay, you know what? I can start to acknowledge who I am a little bit more.
Yeah.
I am South Asian. My parents are from India. My mom's from South India. My dad's from Gujarat. I was raised in a Muslim household. I've fluctuated between different levels of faith, so on and so forth. And then I started to acknowledge over time the things that make me odd and weird. And, I still watch wrestling to this very day. I enjoy it. I'm a big MMA fan, for instance. And then as I began to own my individuality a bit more, I started to then notice that it was alienating some people. And I started to alienate more and more and more. And that threw me off, and I maybe then retreated unto myself, and I started to become the sort of dissolving, chameleon-like person that I was.
Yeah.
And then I wasn't happy anymore.
Yeah.
So once I had the taste of what it felt like to live my truth, and then I retreated back into the veneer of what people wanted me to be, I started feeling unhappy. And I think maybe that contributed to a bit of depression that I went into. But now I've fully come out as here's who I am, and I'm owning day in and day out more of who I am. And I feel like you do that really, really well. Like there's not a day that I've known you where you haven't fully been Jasmine Williams, unless, of course, you're still code switching.
Well, and that's the thing. Like I feel like kind of my whole life I've always been like sort of in between, and I'm sure a lot of like second generation immigrants could probably feel the same way. You have parents from one culture, you raised in another culture, but I feel like I've always had certain like multiple levels to that. Like I've had like class differences, like
Right.
I kind of grew up on like the east end of Scarborough,
Sure.
went to school in more the west end of Scarborough. So like, there's class differences between like the people I'm going to school with and like where I'm living. And like even like I danced growing up, and like
Nice.
competitive dance is a very privileged activity.
Totally, yeah.
So, I go to school with all these friends from like diverse backgrounds, and then like go after school, go to dance with all these like really rich kids, and it was like I always felt like either too much or not enough.
Interesting. Very
So
interesting. Yeah.
it's something that I feel like I'm like I think like definitely there's people I'm with that I feel like I'm more myself around, and it's generally people like from Scarborough or people of color or people who I know can kind of get where I'm coming from. And then there's people where it's like I feel like I hold back because I feel like they just might not get it. So it's like it's constantly a thing, and I'm trying to do less of that. I'm trying to do less of the, like I need to not talk about this because somebody might not get it. Like
Right.
I'm trying to just say it.
Well, I feel like in 2019, this is the time for everybody to just lean into who they are. And
Yeah.
the book I'm rereading right now is Seth Godin's Everybody's Weird.
Okay.
And he talks about that the internet has enabled us to live in our own bubbles, to live in worlds where the things that make us unique are the things that are also going to be the catalysts for wild growth in our lives and wild success in our lives. as evidenced by any number of Twitter hashtags or subreddits or Instagram channels that are dedicated to one thing and one thing only, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
It could be a fan page for a specific Fortnite character. It could be, the Toronto Raptors subreddit. Whatever it is, you can find your space and you can really just lean into who you are and be that person authentically without hesitation.
For sure.
I'm excited for you because I feel like you've now entered into a space and a time where being a female entrepreneur, being in the marketing, creative, multimedia space, and also being a woman of color, specifically Black, so many of the stars have aligned. Like, I feel like this is your time. It truly is.
Yeah.
And I worry sometimes. I talk to some of my white male friends and I'm like, yeah, you feel like an extinct species. Like you feel like the dinosaurs, don't you? Like you're going out of style real quick.
And their shirts a little
yeah,
bit.
and they're becoming very cognizant of it.
Yeah.
And we talked about it, I think maybe last week or the week before, we talked about how Black Panther is nominated for Best Picture.
Mm-hmm.
And right before we went on air, I was like, I don't know if it's like Best Picture over First Men. And then I thought about it. I'm like, no, hold on. There's a bigger battle being fought over here, a battle of representation, a battle that needs to undo hundreds, if not thousands of years of damage that's been done, and especially through the colonial apparatus that really changed power dynamics. And I'm just glossing over just history over here, but like we have to undo a lot of damage that's been done as people of color and as people who have been traditionally underrepresented, marginalized. So now is the time, and I feel like all the stars are aligning. I feel like the government sees this, industry sees this, we see this, and now we have this tool, social media. We have the internet that's allowing us to now work with each other to reward and to incentivize the type of work that's being done.
Yeah.
I know I can see you're benefiting from it. Bailey's benefiting from it. I mean, something like Make Lemonade wasn't possible maybe 10 years ago. Now here we are, part of a thriving ecosystem of female entrepreneurs. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, it's really incredible. And I think also it's happening, like this is all happening at a time where like everybody's being empowered, like creators are being empowered, and then the people employing creators. Like I think like there's, I guess, almost like a widespread democratization that's happening, like not to like over intellectualize it or anything, but just like the people that I'm working with tend to be people of color, people from the LGBTQ community, people who want to work with people like me.
It was wild. I remember Kareem and I, we won a contract one time and we thought we had no business winning this contract. We're like, whoa, we got this?
Yeah.
We bid for this? Like we were probably in the running with a bunch of other agencies and they picked us.
Yeah.
And we sat in the kickoff meeting and the person of color who hired us sat down with us, female person of color, and said, I just want to let you know, like, you guys were good, but the thing that got you through the finish line was we want to invest in this type of work with type of people like that you are, with your intersectionalities. And I thought to myself, something new is happening here.
Yeah.
I'd never experienced that before. Maybe if it was happening, it wasn't acknowledged to me.
Yeah.
But that's when I realized exactly what you said, that people in positions of power are now attuned to the need to reinvest in the community.
Yeah. And it's like it is important because like I think like people who are different, like we see things differently. We point out things that might have missed, like other people might have missed, because it's just not their daily reality.
Yeah. Like
I feel like sometimes I think it almost makes me a better editor in a way, because I'm constantly thinking about how I'm perceived. So I'm always very careful about my language and, like how another person of color would perceive this, how maybe an LGBT person would. Sure. Like, I'm very mindful of that. It's very important to me. And like to somebody who maybe hasn't faced any kind of marginalization in any way, those things might not be as apparent or might not be as like at the forefront, but they are for me, and I think that helps me align with other people with similar values.
Amazing. And on that note, what does your personal board of directors look like? Who are the mentors, maybe the 5, 10, 20 people in your life? You don't have to go into names, but just give me like the sort of backgrounds that they comprise and sort of how it is that you constructed the Jasmine Williams directory advisory board.
Well, I think it needs to be a bit bigger. Like my dad has been such a huge supporter.
Right on.
Like he has always kind of pushed me to do my own thing. Like even like I've always had some like issues in corporate environments, and he was kind of like, okay, when's it happening? When are you starting the company? And now like it's actually brought us so much closer together. Like me starting this business, like we like talk on a much more regular basis. Like we're always kind of like trying like just talking about entrepreneurship. I think it's been helpful for him as well. Like I think just having another person who kind of we're both trying to build something.
Yeah,
really.
he understands your world. He understands you as a result. More,
Yeah,
right?
but we also come
And
from
vice versa.
different worlds because he's an entrepreneur, but he's like, he has a store. Like, it's a very product-based business, mine's service-based.
Right.
So, like, we both, I think, have those different perspectives that we bring. So he's been huge. He also, having an accountant as a dad also helps a lot.
Accountants are not cheap, I'll tell you that. And if they are cheap, then you're going to end up paying it in taxes.
Exactly. So that's been a huge help. Like Shauna, who I mentioned before, is still a huge part of my circle today. Like, I still reach out to her sometimes being like, I have this weird client situation, like, how would you navigate this? And she's just like, some people, I feel like negotiations, that like sales just come super naturally to them. She's one of those people. Like, I think I'm able to learn fast, and I was like, okay, that's what I'm gonna do.
Wow.
But like, she kind of has like a natural instinct, which is, I find so impressive. And I think like the Make Lemonade community has been huge. Like, for people who might not know about Make Lemonade, it's a co-working space for women in downtown Toronto. And like, I think back in September, that's when I started kind of working there. Like, I work there sort of part-time on an energy exchange. I'm like a part of their front desk team, and then in exchange get to be in the space. And then since being there, I've been connected to so many amazing women doing such incredible things. Like, I learned something literally every day that I'm there. Like, last week I was sick and just sort of kind of was like, somebody asked me how my week went. I was like, not great. I was sick. And like, immediately I had 3 or 4 women being like, oh, this is what I do with my clients. Like, this is how like I handle those situations. Oh, you should try this. And it's like, beautiful. It's just like, it's so amazing, like the community. Like, shout out to the founder, Rachel Kelly. She's really created quite an incredible space there. So yeah, like, that's kind of been a very much like a village raises the child kind of thing. Like, I feel like I'm surrounded by mentors. Like,
and what was really cool is I bumped into you not too long ago at the Women in Color Speaker Boot Camp. And that's when my eyes opened up to, there's a movement that's happening concurrent to everything else you're seeing in the city. Where there's some people, Muhammad Asadullah and Chanel McFarlane, who started this, and working with their team to now empower a whole crop, a whole roster. I mean, there was like 50 women and people of color over there that were all burgeoning speakers. And I thought to myself, a thing is happening. Like, I'm going to see the after effects of this, not like next year, not in the next 5 years, but like 15, 20 years from now. I'm never going to sit in a conference, hopefully, knock on wood, I'm never going to sit in a conference where I look at the panel and I groan. And I'm like, just another bunch of old white dudes on this panel now.
No, that was, being a part of that boot camp was such a special experience. Like, actually, a lot of us who participated in it are still in, like, there's a Slack group. We still like talk. We like meet up. Cause it was so special. Like, cause all of us like came from a place of feeling underrepresented, like feeling like we, like having that kind of imposter syndrome, like we don't belong up there, like I'm not old enough, I'm not experienced enough. Like, even like some of the people who were coaching us applied to be in the boot camp, and the I guess Muhammad and was like, what are you doing? Like, you're an incredible speaker, you need to be a coach. So it's like, there's this thing that happens with like women and LGBT people where I think we like, it's damaging, like how much we underestimate ourselves. And that weekend was huge. It was huge.
It was huge for me too, because I actually had one of the participants, you might know her, Bailey Greenspan.
Possibly.
I don't remember where she works, but I need to follow up with her on Twitter. She took me aside and respectfully said, like, great session, Hamza. One piece of feedback I have to give you is that you asserted at the end as one of your takeaways to just show up and own your story confidently. And she's like, it's good advice in theory, but when you think about the audience you're speaking to, simply telling them once that you're good enough and ready to show up isn't enough, because these have been typically underrepresented, disenfranchised groups. And she's like, you know this because you're one of them as well. It's not going to take one pat on the back for you to feel confident. It's going to take 2, 3, 4, 5 pats on the back to feel confident. Like, heck, here we are in episode 3 or 4 of this podcast, and I'm still like, I don't know if I'm doing a good job. But the audience is like, yeah, this is great, keep it up. But I don't inherently believe that we've done a good job yet. And that is not a reflection on the podcast. The podcast is actually objectively fantastic. It's my fucking baggage that I have to unpack.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I think that, the onus isn't just on me. I have to rely on my community in the way that you are to help me get through this. And one thing that you seem to be doing really well is just asking your mentors for advice. I'm the worst, man. I just keep on buying my mentors free food and taking them out for breakfast and dinners and giving them gifts, but I never ask them for advice. Or at least I don't intentionally ask them for advice. I'm scared. I'm like, oh my God, I feel like I'm going to take something from you. But
I see, like, for me, I always just try to, like, kind of lead with gratitude, like, and I always try to give back when I can. So, like, whenever, like, for instance, like, if I reach out to Shauna or something, like, for advice, like, one thing that was great too when we first got connected is that I was actually kind of in an editor position. So, like, when I was asking her about freelance advice, then I immediately, like, asked her to write an article and, like, paid her for that.
Right.
So, like, I always try to kind of give back, or, like, I'm literally the first person to, like, if anybody asks me, it's like, so what do you think about Shauna? Like, I will talk your ear off.
Yeah.
So, like, I always just try to give back. Like, I don't really take anything or any kind of piece of advice or anybody giving me their time for granted. And I think maybe that's where some people kind of falter. It's like if you're constantly asking, and then you're just like, okay, bye.
Yeah, Jasmine, and I feel like this is a good segue for us because when we did the year one project, it was to try to figure out what trait, what value, what attribute wildly successful people have, and we quickly found out that it was resilience. Like resilience, without a doubt, the ability to withstand and adapt to stress, grit, boldness, tenacity was the superpower. But I've also noticed that that's the superpower that's almost passive. The active superpowers are twofold. Hyper competence, so being really fucking good at something, and then hyper generosity, willing to very freely give it away.
Yeah.
And it seems like you've done and you're continuing to do both, and there's no surprises when it comes to your success. Like you being this successful, Jasmine, is not an accident. You're hyper competent, hyper generous, very resilient. Here we are in 2019. Talk to me about 2029. What does wild success look like for Jasmine Williams Media? How are you going to know that, I'm enough for me, I'm enough for a lot of people? I'm feeling pretty damn good about this.
I don't think I will ever feel like I'm enough. Like, I don't think there'll ever be a point where I'm just like, yeah, I've made it. Like,
interesting.
I think
always going to have the underdog mentality.
I think so. Like, I think I could reach the top of a mountain and probably, like, try to find a ladder somewhere and, like, keep going. It's like, we haven't gone far enough. But, yeah, that is such a huge question. And it is something that, like, I am currently grappling with because, like you said, I feel like I've accomplished a lot in a short period of time. And now I'm kind of at this point where it's like, all the reins are gone. Like, there's no boss, there's no management, career ladder.
Sure.
Like, I can kind of make my way in any way, and that's super daunting. I didn't realize how daunting it would feel.
Right.
Like, I thought I'd just be like, oh yeah, this is awesome, like I have so much power, and now I'm just like, oh, like I don't know what to do with it.
I think that there is a path over here. Like, so we talked right before we went on air about hourly rates, and you talked about how initially you took your hourly rate off your website because you wanted to sort of reestablish and recreate expectations. Now you've put it back on. What is, if somebody wants to work with you, what is your introductory rate?
Well, yeah, my I guess my hourly rate is $75 an hour.
Okay, which is fantastic. It's competitive, but still accessible enough. Then I think the next step is you graduate that, like $150 an hour, $300 an hour, $500 an hour.
Yeah.
I've seen some agencies charge $5,000 per article. Right, that has happened before, and it's still happening right now as we speak. So I think the sky's the limit as far as how you want to price yourself and figuring out what you want to price out. But then you're going to get to a point very quickly where Jasmine Williams Media is going to be the name. Jasmine Williams will be the face. I will pay Jasmine Williams Media, but I don't know who's going to work on my stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm perfectly okay with that because I know that it's going to have your seal of approval and you will have breathed your spirit into the agency. By the end of Splash Effect, I was not doing any of the work. People were hiring me and Kareem. We were just delegating, subcontracting, outsourcing.
Yeah.
But it didn't matter because at the end of the day, my name was on the line, Kareem's name was on the line. Yeah. And I feel like you're going to get there very soon.
Well, I think that's kind of like what I sort of need to accept. Like, I think that this has the potential to be really big. Like, the fact that it's grown so quickly, so fast. Like, some days I even look at just kind of like my accounting software and like just look at like the way this has scaled, and it's like literally like all the goals that I set, it's just like I've done, and it's crazy. So yeah, like now I'm kind of at that point where it's like like, you know, say what you will about lean in, but it's like, yeah, do I lean into this? Like, do I keep this momentum going, or do I scale back? And I'm like, okay, because right now I'm at the point where I have enough for myself.
Am I correct in assuming that this is the most money you've ever made?
Yeah, I
Which
guess.
is amazing. And I know when Bailey was making the jump as well, she's like, how am I going to make my salary back? How am I going to pay for benefits? Year one of the business, Bailey nearly doubled or tripled what she was making
Wow.
when working full time. And I'm
Yeah.
like, you know what? You are taking the ultimate bet on yourself. Because
Yeah.
when you said I'm going full time, you sent a signal out to the rest of the world, to me, which is I trust myself so much that I'm putting my entire livelihood
Yeah.
on the line for this.
Yeah.
And that communicates a different kind of energy to me.
Yeah.
Because when you were doing it part-time, it was like, okay, so you've got 1 foot in, 1 foot out.
Yeah.
But when you did it full-time, I was like, oh, you are serious. Like, you were going to give this your undivided time, energy, attention.
Yeah.
And when it comes to scaling, and I think you're going to find your repeatable, scalable model very soon. If not, you already have found it.
Yeah.
Which is, I trust Jasmine. Jasmine, here's money. I would like, sorry, in the most crude form. Jasmine, here's money. Could you produce product?
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to get to a place where you're going to have 4 or 5 writers on staff, on your roster, and your freelance network that you can then delegate out to, and then just continue to ingest more clients.
Yeah.
And I think the long-term goal should be you do as little work as possible
Yeah.
and make all the money in the world.
Yeah.
Do
Well,
you
there
have
you go.
an-
You mapped out my 10-year plan.
Well, I think this is true for any entrepreneur, right?
no,
But do
you're
you have a
absolutely right.
number in your head? Like
Number,
Like,
like money-wise,
like, you know,
financially?
I feel like there's like fuck you money, which is like you can't fire me, fuck you.
Yeah.
And there's like fuck the world money,
Mm.
which is I can exit all of this. I can create my own reality.
Yeah.
My grandkids' kids are going to be okay.
Yeah. Well, like I see, yeah, I guess like I struggle a bit with thinking that long term. Like I think I've always maybe thought in like the next 1 to 2 years, next 5 years. Like I know like a big thing that I have for this year is just to make it to like the 5-figure monthly mark.
Wow.
That's like I think I can make it.
Totally.
So like once I hit that, that's kind of like I think in my head that's the point where I'm like, this is real. Like it's still real, but like this is like that's the point where this is an agency. Like this is a thing where I can employ people and really grow something and really make something amazing.
I'm
But-
excited for you, and I have no doubt that it's going to happen. I mean, the work speaks for itself. If anyone's been on Student Life Network recently, they've probably read something that you've written.
Most likely,
And
yeah.
it's really good stuff. It's
Thank
really
you.
good stuff. Like you write at a caliber where I don't think I would trust many people on this planet with representing the voice of the high-profile clients that we've brought to the table
Oh,
with you,
wow.
and you've just hit home runs every single time.
I appreciate that so much.
Let's get into now the action, the performance point section. I'm trying to figure out a catchy name for it right
Yeah.
now. Don't know what it is yet, but it's a portion of the podcast where we reverse engineer and break down how it is that you spend your time, your energy, your attention, how it is that you optimize it.
Right.
And I've got 3 questions in each of these categories, and take as long or you can articulate your answers as succinctly as you'd like. Essentially, we just want to get to the specific actions, the specific systems and tools, if you have any recommendations that you're using to generate the output that you are.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to be really interesting because what I want to do is at the end of the year, compile all the different answers and just try to figure out if there's a pattern amongst all the different guests that we've brought out for how it is that you can optimize and manage your time, your energy, and your attention, because all the guests that we're bringing on are successful just like yourself and all have wild success in the near and far future ahead of them. So I'm really excited to hear your answers because I don't think I've ever asked you these questions.
Probably not.
Okay, so on behalf of myself and all the listeners of the podcast, let's start by talking about your time. How do you establish clear boundaries so that you have enough time to focus on what you need to get done? And again, thinking about the fact that you've never said no to me. And I know that it's going to come one day. You're going to say, Hamza, I can't take on this project.
I know, and that day I feel like that'll be a sad day.
I will be ecstatic because that'll mean to me that you're now taking the next necessary step to building the empire.
Yeah. I guess like to me, like I've always had like a really good ability to just sort of like tune out the world. Like I kind of just like plug in, put some like chill music on, and then just kind of and just sort of go.
Damn, you're a music worker. I'm a silence worker. I've stopped being a music worker. It's really hard for me now.
I think like I can do music if it's like music I haven't really heard before.
Oh, so I'm the opposite. I need to hear the same song over and over again.
No, like if I listen to music I already know, then I just start singing along, and then it's like I don't get anything done. But yeah, in terms of like I guess setting the boundaries, sometimes like it's as much as like you're gonna get this. I'll just tell myself, it's like, you're gonna get this article done in 2 hours,
Right.
and then I do it. Like, I know
Yeah.
it sounds like, that sounds crazy, but I just try to be super, super intentional. And, obviously if it takes longer than that, I don't beat myself up for it, but I usually have like the 3 or so things that I absolutely must hit. There's a one thing that I know I have to hit, and then I just do it. And then, like, I guess, like, to me, like, it's, especially being self-employed, it's like people, like my friends always ask, like, I could never do it. It's like, I have to, like, this is, I took this work on. This work is what pays my rent, what feeds me, so I do it.
And one of the things that you do really well is you meet your deadlines. And I know that seems like a really elementary, rudimentary thing to talk about, deadlines, but I think that's crucial to building trust.
Yeah.
So that anytime I've given you a project, I've been able to go to sleep peacefully at night knowing I'm going to wake up the next day or whenever the deadline is and expect it in my inbox.
Yeah.
The only time that you've never hit a deadline was like literally last week, and that's because you were deathly ill. Which is perfectly acceptable. And like, you reached out to me and you're like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, don't be sorry. Like, you were actually about to die. Like, you were super sick. It's all good. And this is the first time in like 6 or 7 years of knowing you that it's happened. And it was like by a day that you missed a deadline, right? And not even like the final deadline. You missed like a draft deadline. And there was 3 other draft deadlines. So it's all good. It's water under the bridge.
Yeah.
There's an author by the name of Douglas Adams who once said, I love deadlines. I love the whooshing noise they make as they go by. Tell us all the juicy, intimate details of your relationship with deadlines.
Well,
because you live in a world of deadlines.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I definitely credit my journalism education for that. Like, it makes you literally have assignments where you have to put a whole story together in like 2 hours. So that it makes you very focused. You kind of know exactly how much time to devote to certain things. I think that's also it. Like, I've been writing for so long. I know how long something is going to take me to do. Like, I sometimes underestimate it, or I guess, I underestimate how long it would take, but I generally know, like, I can get a blog post done in like 3 hours. I can get a certain thing done in like 1 hour. Like, I know that, so I kind of try. I can set deadlines accordingly. But yeah, like, I don't know, being like, that's one thing too. Like, going into this, it's like, I know I'm pretty good at what I do, but I know, like, that's not enough,
right.
Or like, that would wear people out eventually, to be like the brilliant writer who's like so unreliable and you never quite know when stuff's getting in.
I think that's when you have to just lean in all the way and just become a tortured artist and commit to that one script that might never get picked up at that point. Like, all options are off the table.
Exactly. So yeah, it's just, it's something that I like, it matters a lot to me. I take it very personally. I have missed deadlines before, and then one thing I try to do if I do miss a deadline is I try to make it up in some way. So I might go a little bit extra.
Discount, extra half post, whatever,
Yeah, and I find that usually helps, because people are like, okay, this happened, but, like, she's going above and beyond to make it right.
Do you ever get overwhelmed by how many deadlines you have?
Oh, yeah.
Do you sometimes procrastinate as a result?
I do. I procrastinate on certain things. Like, I procrastinate on tasks that I don't necessarily know exactly how to start.
Got it.
Like blog posts are usually the things I don't procrastinate on, because it's like,
I know the system.
I know the system. I know how to get it done. But some of the more like strategic tasks or things that, like, it's like, I just kind of have to sit down and think for a while. That's the hard part, where I like really have to make sure I'm in the zone, and like, I can kind of I tend to put those off a little bit.
How do you beat procrastination? What's your go-to tactic?
I guess, like, I like kind of live and die by like my Asana.
Right.
Like when I used to just do stuff on the side, I just kind of had things like little notification reminders, but like right away I was like, okay, if this is a business, I'm going to treat it like a business. So like, I use my Asana really to map things out. But I guess, like, honestly, I do procrastinate. I just kind of wait until the absolute last minute to start, and then I start. So like, probably my clients wouldn't like to hear this, but like, if I say something's gonna take a week, I probably start it the day before.
And that's perfectly fine. I had a friend who just did that. Like Fazan, one of my best friends, all throughout university, he would wait until the nth hour. He would be studying beside me. I would see him watching movies, spending time on Reddit, just browsing social media. I'm like, bro, we have this due in a few hours. He's like, it hasn't activated yet. I'm like, what hasn't activated yet? He's like, just the drive. And when the sense of urgency became apparent to him, that's when he became Super Saiyan almost.
Yeah.
And he went all in. And I think there's a law to describe that. It's Parkinson's law. Work expands so as to fill the time allocated for its completion. If you give yourself a week, it'll take a week. If you give yourself 24 hours, it'll take 24 hours.
I live by that rule a lot. Yeah, I remember like in university, I freaked my mom out once because I had a take-home exam and literally submitted it at like 11:55.
Oh my goodness, it's playing with fire.
And she's like, "What if your computer died?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "But it didn't."
It did.
She's like, "You're insane." I'm like, "I don't."
I'm such a natural procrastinator. I've learned that about myself, that my default is to procrastinate.
Yeah.
If I had nothing else to do, you would find me on a couch playing video games with Cheetos dust on my fingers.
Yeah.
That's who I am naturally, and every day I wake up, I have to fight actively to not be that guy.
Yeah.
And so what I do is I simulate constraints. Like I'm always like, I need to be here by this time. I need to work in 25-minute chunks. I need to count to 3 and build up the first actionable task towards that.
Yeah.
There's a whole like dance that goes on for the Hamza enterprise in order to beat procrastination. And it's validating to hear that I'm not alone in that respect.
Absolutely not. Like I do the same sort of things. Like sometimes I'm kind of like mean to myself. It's like, you can't have lunch until you finish this article or something like that.
Negative reinforcement, right?
Yeah.
Why not?
Or like, yeah, like working out of a co-working space has been super helpful too, because it's like now I have like a dedicated spot to like just go and work.
And you can't work out of your PJs anymore. You can't work on your bed.
Yeah.
Which is a mistake that a lot of people make. Like they work in the same clothes that they sleep in, and they work in the same space that they sleep in. And it creates a cognitive dissonance almost. Yeah. Switching gears to energy real quick. How do you decide between choosing to work more or to rest and recover? Mm-hmm. You had to confront the realities of your body giving up on you.
Yeah.
But aside from like falling deathly ill, how is it that you decide when it's time to stop working and start resting?
There's usually just a point where I just can't do it anymore. Like a lot of my work is super highly, it's very creative. And yeah, like I kind of get to a point where I sort of ask myself, it's like, would you be happy like submitting this right now, like or like if if it's not on deadline or something, then it's like, if it's not good, then yeah, I that's when I take a break. But I honestly just try to, in a weird way, like even though I can work whenever I want or any hours I want, I'd usually stick to like a 9 to 5 kind of 10 to 6 schedule.
There you go.
That's usually what works for me. So around like 5 or 6, that's sort of when I
hard stop. Yeah,
that's a
Good
hard
for
stop.
You. And then what are some, like, if you feel comfortable sharing it, what is a bad habit that you have right now that's affecting your energy that you're trying to change? And I'll tell you mine.
A bad habit that's affecting my energy. Honestly, just overscheduling myself.
Overscheduling yourself.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
I know exactly how much work I can get done in a day, but I always push it. And then I'm just constantly in the state of like catching up.
Wow.
So I need to just like stick to like 3. I think I read somewhere that's like people can really only get 3 major tasks done every day.
Yeah, I've heard 5 as the absolute max.
Yeah, and I think that's me. But I always try to cram in like 4 or 5.
Yeah, there's diminishing returns. The more tasks you add on, you're just going to end up half-assing a bunch of tasks. I'd rather just whole ask 2 or 3 tasks, right?
Yeah.
And give those tasks your all.
Yeah.
My bad habit is pre-workout powder.
Okay.
No, it really is, man. I'm older now, and I go to the gym sometimes without pre-workout. I'm like, what am I doing here? This is just so boring. I'm not enjoying this anymore.
Yeah.
So I got on pre-workout recently again, and it's fantastic. The problem is I do it super early in the morning.
Okay.
And I get all zoned out by noon every single day. So like I'll go to the gym 6, 7 in the morning, pre-workout, feel like a superhero, workout, have a great workout, feel the endorphins, and then the crash comes in hard. And I think between the hours of 12 and 2, I'm mindless.
Yeah.
So I need to figure out a better relationship with caffeine, maybe stagger my caffeine intake, maybe decrease my dosage, or find ways to recreate that pre-workout feeling without pre-workout.
Yeah, like one thing I am pretty strict about is I don't have caffeine after noon, like after 12 p.m.
That's good, yeah.
Because like I'm really sensitive to caffeine, and if I have like even like a tea at like 3 p.m.
You're gonna be staring at the ceiling till 4 in the morning.
Yeah. So and like I really need my sleep, so that's something where I'm just like, that's the only thing where I'm very like particular about.
People don't talk about that enough. Sleep is, I think, the ultimate competitive advantage.
I think so. That's something I've never really been good at sacrificing. Like I pulled all-nighters in university, but like my output is never great.
No.
Like the essays I've put in, it's just like I could have done a lot better. So yeah, I'm like I need a lot of sleep. I feel like I need at least like 7 to 8 hours.
That's good.
Less than that, and I start to like I'm not at my best. And I think especially for what I do, having to be so creative all the time, like
Right.
I need to rest and recharge.
Are you a night owl?
No, early bird.
What time are you in bed?
Like I'm not super early, like I'm like, but naturally I can wake up at like 7
Wow,
or 6.
that's good.
Yeah.
And so that means you're usually in bed by 11 tops.
Yeah.
Way to go.
And like I'm early bird in that like I have a lot of energy in the morning. Like
Yeah.
I piss my roommate off all the time because I'll like wake up at 7 and start doing the dishes.
Yeah.
Like
You're that person, eh?
Yeah.
When it comes to attention now, so that's time and energy squared off. When it comes to attention, how do you determine whether an upcoming opportunity will be truly beneficial or whether it's a shiny distraction?
Oh,
Because
man.
not all opportunities are equal.
Yeah. That's something where I do struggle with. Like I said, I say yes to everything. I say
Yeah.
yes to a lot of things that, and in a way, I think that does work for me because I have noticed that like it grows. Like, you know, you say yes to one thing and then people like it and they say like I've become like a go-to writer for so many different
brands,
people
yeah.
just because of one article. You know, you do one thing really well and it kind of it you know, it grows from there. But now that I finally, I guess, can confidently say I've gotten to a point where like, you know, I'm good. Like I don't have to worry about whether I'm going to get more clients or whether people are going to want to work with
There's
me
a
or not.
steady stream now.
Yeah, now I'm starting to be a bit more
Like selective. Yeah.
selective, and I kind of feel like the kind of typical like if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no.
Interesting.
And I also really think like kind of it like can I make magic for this person? Like is this something that like at the end of the day they will really be better off for it? Like am I really the best person for this particular job? And like there have been some times where I've been like yeah, sure, I could do it, but now I've been more like, you know what, there's somebody better and I will introduce you to
Have
them.
you ever said no to a really lucrative contract?
Yes, like not quite. Like there's been some potential contracts that could have been lucrative, but it wasn't like, you know, I was about to sign and then, you know, walked away. But there have been some opportunities where, you know, I felt like there maybe personalities didn't mesh or things like that where it's like, you know, I kind of just pulled myself out of the running.
Are there any clients you wouldn't work for? Any industries?
Like
let's say the NRA reached out to you and like, Jasmine, we need an ebook
absolutely
on
not.
gun ownership.
Yeah.
But here is $20,000.
No.
Really,
No.
eh?
Yeah, no, like that's like my website says, like I'm really big about like game changers and change makers, and the change makers is really about like socially sustainable, socially responsible businesses. So that's super important to me. And if I feel like they're not giving back to the world in some way,
Sure.
that doesn't align.
Those are the change makers. What about the game changers?
I
feel like Donald Trump is a game changer, and he would come and say, Jasmine, I was listening to the podcast, fantastic podcast, great, really great stuff over here. Could you write my press releases?
That's actually not a bad Donald Trump.
I tried.
Yeah, like for sure. Like
He'd become my communications director.
yeah, like I'm all about like the values have to align.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Happy to hear that. That makes me very happy.
Yeah, and like I'm trying to think too, like I think there have been I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I know there have been some things that I've written that I haven't felt super proud of, and just having that feeling of like not wanting to put my name on something.
Right.
It was hard. You know, like that was a feeling where it's like, oh, this is what selling out feels like.
Yeah.
This is what people mean when they say it. It's not a great feeling. Like you literally traded like what you stand for money. So I have been in that position in like full-time jobs where it's like as like a content writer, you can't really always control the certain clients that you work with, the stories that you cover, the perspectives even that you take.
Right.
So having been in that position of having to put out content just for the kind of the sake of it, to get those clicks, to get those eyeballs, and feeling really cheap and dirty afterwards, I never want to do that
And
again.
it's possible to be wildly successful. When we started Splash Effect, we had a very strict mandate, which is only work with do good clients,
Yeah.
education, government, nonprofit, healthcare.
Yeah.
Some of my mentors said, yeah, you're going to come back to me in a year and say, this is not going to work out. You're going to have to go corporate.
Yeah.
It worked. We did it for 5-6 years straight. No problems whatsoever. It's
Yeah.
just an economy of scale. Yes, they pay less. Yes, they take their time with payments, but you just change the variable of how many clients you have.
Yeah.
And I feel like the industry is now going to catch up where there's grants that are available for specifically the type of values-driven business, purpose-driven business that you're trying to build.
Yeah.
Good stuff. And my last question, Jasmine, when it comes to attention is, how do you determine the ratios between work and life balance? Do you believe work-life balance is worthwhile in the first place and achievable?
Whew. Yes, I do kind of believe more in like a work-life structure than work-life balance. Like, I don't think really work-life balance really is super like to have it perfectly like equilibrium. Like, I don't think that really makes sense. And I think in my case, like, I think a lot of my aspects of my work do intertwine with my life. Like, I'm lucky to work with clients that I actually really like, and for some people I'm actually friends with. So to me, like, that is kind of a blending of sorts. So I guess to me it's kind of like sort of managing my energy and like what I can do in a given it's sort of like percentages. So maybe it's like 70% work one day and then like 30% other things, and maybe it's other days it's sort of switched. But I just try to do something every day that's just for me. Like,
I love that.
I don't try to like overthink it too much. I try to just be like very grateful for the position I'm in. And just, yeah, try to lean into these kinds of opportunities that come up and that are exciting to me.
I'm so happy to hear that. And I have one last question for you, but what I want to start introducing from this podcast onwards, and you're the first person on the podcast to do this, is listener questions.
Okay.
So we have one question from a listener who
Cool.
gave out this question, and I had it banked. And I said, I'm going to ask it for a guest who I think would be able to answer this really well. And I think you're the person to answer this. And I'm going to paraphrase the question over here. The question is, an influencer reached out to me recently and asked for my freelance creative services, but they only want to pay me an exposure. How do I tell them, how do I communicate respectfully that this is how I make my money and I'm actually damn good at my work?
Ooh, that's a great...
And I'm sure you've heard this throughout your career.
That's a great question. Yeah.
Shout out to Elliot, by the way.
Yeah, it's so many people devalue creative work, and it's so upsetting. I get, like, how would you structure a response? I would say, like, thank you so much for reaching out. Just to let you know, my rates for this kind of work start here. If you're interested in proceeding, I'd love to chat. If that's, outside of your budget, then unfortunately, I don't think this is a good opportunity, but, be happy to support you, and, best of luck. Or not even happy to support you, just sort of just best of luck. Yeah, I find just holding firm.
I think that's the sign of somebody has run up against this multiple times and has done experiments that has landed you the perfect answer, because my answer is identical to that.
Really?
And I think the moment that I realized that this was the most effective version of that answer is when I changed my tune from "what's your budget" to "my rates start at."
Yeah.
That simple change was a game changer.
Yeah.
So before I used to be like, "Hey, what's the budget? I'm happy to work within it."
Yeah.
And then they would always lowball me.
Yeah.
But when I said, "Hey, the hourly rate starts at $150,"
Yeah.
that's when things were like, "Oh, okay, so we can't afford you." And then I said, "Okay, fine. Well, my threshold is this. How can we work in kind? If not, can I refer you to someone in my network?" Fantastic answer. Yeah, folks, you heard it right there. Jasmine and I both co-signed that answer.
Yeah.
My last question for you on behalf of all the listeners who are on the fence about starting whatever it is, starting a business, starting a family, starting that book project. What advice, as an entrepreneur who's now doing this successfully, what advice would you give to somebody who's hesitant to start?
I would say, like, if it's something that is kind of eating at you, like, for me, like, I would call myself like a startup nerd. Like, I was just obsessed with everything to do with entrepreneurship. Like, it was just something that, like, I knew I had to try at some point. Then you gotta try. And, like, you don't have to necessarily go all in. Like, you can start it with a side hustle. You can, test the water. Like, if it's a kind of a hobby right now, then you could create a blog around it or something, just to see if, if there is interest in there. Because I have seen some people who have kind of dove into it full force and, been burned up a little bit because they weren't quite ready. So there are ways to test the waters, but I'd say absolutely try. Like, I feel at this point where even if I decide like in a few months or like a year or 2 years from now that I'm good and want to go back to the corporate world, I will never ever regret doing this. I would much more regret having not done it and not knowing whether I would succeed or fail than to try it and see what happened.
Amen. Jasmine, say yes to everything until you absolutely can't.
Yes.
The mantra that I'm walking away with from this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, your energy, for sharing your gifts, for sharing your wisdom, and for all the work that you do. I mean, Student Life Network, all the brands that we've collaborated with are so much better because you're doing this work, and shout out to you for doing that. Where can listeners follow your adventures online?
For sure. On Instagram at Jasmine Williams Media, all one word. You can find me on LinkedIn. I think it's the same sort of handle type thing. I have a Facebook page as well, Jasmine Williams Media, and then Twitter is at the Jazz Williams.
Got it. And where's your blog?
Oh, yes. My blog is jasminewilliams.ca/blog.
Amazing. And your most recent post is about your experiences falling sick as an entrepreneur and how you pushed through that.
Well, I think that will be my next blog. That was just my Instagram
You just announced
post.
it. Okay, right.
But
okay.
yeah,
Which is technically a microblog, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I tend to kind of crowdsource ideas that way. So yeah, like the freelance rate post became an Instagram post, and now the sick post is an Instagram post, and I think I'm going to turn it into a blog.
Amazing. We're waiting with bated breath for that. Thank you so much, Jasmine. You're the best. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
We're out, folks.